Good morning, children. Today in English in class 11, the chapter The Address is what we will continue. Yesterday we had reached that point of time in the lesson, in the chapter, where the narrator made a second attempt to visit Mrs. Dorling's house at 46 Marconi Street because the first attempt had proved to be futile. But second time when she visited, Mrs. Dorling was not at home. She had gone out for an errand to collect something from outside. But her daughter, who was about 15 years old, invited her to come in and wait for her mother. So the narrator was glad and willingly entered the house. I followed the girl along the passage. He says, that is Miss Dorling. An old-fashioned iron Hanukkah candle holder hung next to a mirror. That is what she was shocked. The moment she observed that, the moment she saw that, immediately she was able to identify that that was a possession of her mother. That is, the this candle holder is actually used at a time in the month of December. It is used in a Jewish festival of lights in December. So that was what she saw hanging next to the mirror. We never used it because it was much more cumbersome than a single candlestick. We never used it. It was not frequently used because it was unmanageable. So they preferred to use a single candlestick. But at the same time, the moment she saw that, the moment she observed, she was able to identify that as a mother's belonging. "Won't you sit down?" asked the girl. She held the door of the living room and I went inside past her. So she was invited in the living room and she was invited to sit and wait for her mother to return. And I went inside past her. So she willingly did that. I stopped horrified. The moment she stepped into the room, horrified generally we associate with fear, a sense of fear. But out here, this is something very shocking for her. And why she was shocked? Because in the room, she has entered a stranger's room, a stranger's house, but the belongings, most of the things that were kept around in that room were her mother's belongings. So she was able to identify them almost immediately. I was in a room I knew and did not know. I did not know because she has entered a stranger's house. She has come here for the first time. She's entered the house and the room for the first time. But I was in a room I knew. I knew it. That means I was acquainted. I was familiar with the things, with the belongings that had been kept here and there in the room. I found myself in the midst of things I did want to see again. So, on one hand, she was glad because she saw the things that she desired to see, feel and remember her mother by means of these, but which oppressed me. That means it upset her because this was not what she had expected. This is not what she had anticipated. Or because of the tasteless way everything was arranged. The furniture and all other things had not been arranged in very systematically, or they were not in an organized manner. Because of the ugly furniture, the furniture did not seem to be very appealing to her, or the muggy smell. Muggy is unpleasant. There's something which is unpleasantly warm and humid when a room is not ventilated well enough. So there was something which she did not find very comfortable and pleasant. And the muggy smell that hung there, the odor, I don't know. But I scarcely dared to look around me. She says, I did not know why I felt uncomfortable. It was that muggy smell, that unpleasant smell that was there, or the tasteless way the things had been arranged, or the furniture that did not seem to be appealing to her. But she didn't feel nice. But I scarcely dared to look around me. Scarcely dared to look around me because she dared. For a moment she felt that if she looked around, she would see more of her mother's belongings and that would make her more uneasy and uncomfortable. The girl moved a chair. I sat down and stared at the woolen tablecloth. So the chair which had been offered to her, she occupied that, and she stared means intently looked at the woolen tablecloth, because that also happened to be her mother's. I rubbed it. My fingers grew warm from rubbing. I followed the lines of the pattern on the tablecloth. Somewhere on the edge, there should be a burn mark that had never been repaired. Now, this was her way of trying to identify whether this tablecloth also was her mother's or not, because there had been a burn mark which had never been repaired at that time for some reason or the other. So, if she was able to find that burn mark, that would indicate that that tablecloth also was her mother's. But it had never been repaired. My mother will be back soon, said the girl. I've already made tea for her. Will you have a cup? So the girl was very polite and very hospitable as well. She made her comfortable and also offered a cup of tea, stating that she had prepared the tea already. If she would like to have one, she was most welcome to do that. Thank you. I looked up. The girl put cups ready on the tea table. She had a broad back like her mother's. That means naturally she's a daughter, so in some ways she resembled her mother and the structure. Just like her mother, she poured tea from a white pot. So she looked quite like her mother, and accordingly as she had offered tea, she poured it in a cup. All it had was a gold border on the lid of the teapot. I remembered. So I remember that meant that she was able to the more she looked around, the more she was able to identify her mother's possessions. And this was also one of her mother's. That was the teapot from which she poured tea in the teacup. She opened a box and took some spoons out. That's a nice box. I heard my own voice. It was a strange voice. Why? Because she seemed to be, she felt very strange, she felt very uneasy and uncomfortable, that almost all the things that she saw around, the teapot, the tablecloth, the candle holder, and the more she looked around, all she was able to recognize, which happened to be her mother's possessions. So she naturally felt very strange and had not expected that it had been used by the family for years, as though each sound was different in this room. Oh, you know about them. She had turned round and brought me my tea. So she poured the tea from the teapot and offered it to her. She laughed. My mother says it is antique. Antique means something, a collection of objects and things which are old and are valuable. We've got lots more. So she boasted about the antiques which they had in plenty. She pointed round the room. See for yourself. That meant that this was one of them, one of the antiques, but there was so much more in the room arranged over there. So she could very easily look around for herself. I had no need to follow her hand. That meant she did not wait for her to point out towards what, because she was already familiar, because these were the things that belonged to her mother once upon a time. I knew which things she meant. I just looked at the still life over the tea table. As a child, I had always fancied the apple on the pewter plate. The still life, that is, painting of fruits or something on the pewter plate that can be tin alloy. So, as a child, she had always favored it, she had always supported it, and therefore, she did not have to be told that this was also one of the antiques that they had. We use it for everything, she said. Miss Dorling, she said that it is used very frequently. Once we even ate off the plates hanging there on the wall. I wanted so much, but it wasn't anything special. So she says that we use all the antiques which are lying in their house, which she does not know, do not belong to her, to the family, but they belong to the narrator and her mother. So she's boasting about it that once she enjoyed eating on the antique plate also, but it was nothing special. It was not as enjoyable as she had expected it to be. I had found the burn mark on the tablecloth. If you recall that when she had come here, she had looked at the tablecloth and she was trying to find the burn mark on the tablecloth which had never been repaired. Finally, she was able to do that, and she was able to understand that that tablecloth also, that woolen tablecloth, belonged to her mother. The girl looked questioningly at me. That is, that she was surprised that what exactly was she trying to do. Yes, I said, you get so much used to touching all these lovely things in the house, you hardly look at them anymore. So she told her that she, in a way, admired and appreciated that they have so many lovely things over there. And she says, you get so familiar with all those lovely things that when you have something new, obviously there is more fascination for that. But then when over the time period, the collection, it does not have that much that does not have that much of fascination as such for those things. Thank you.